Hey there friends, in this video I'm going to show you how to create this Peace and Joy card featuring Stampin' Up's In the Pines bundle and the Peace and Joy bundle. Now this card also features a technique using embossing paste through a stencil on felt. So I have here the Just Jade felt sheet that I previously added embossing paste to. So I used the shimmery white embossing paste and I used a polka dot stencil. And I show you how to do that in the first video that I created using the In the Pines and the Joy dies. So I die cut a circle for that card using the second from the smallest circle, or sorry, second from the largest circle from the stitch shape die. So that's what I used to create this piece over here. So now I'm going to take the largest of the circles from this same die set and I'm going to center it around the circle that I had previously die cut. So I'm going to hold it in place with a little bit of tape and then I'm going to run it back and forth through my die cutting machine. So I'm back from my die cutting machine and I'm just going to carefully remove my die. And then you can see this time it cut a little bit better. I went back and forth, oh heavens, probably like 6 to 8 times. And I added in a couple of extra layers of wax paper just to help create some additional pressure as I was die cutting through the foam, or through the felt rather. And then using my scissors, where I had die cut the previous circle, there's a little bit, it's not like a perfectly clean cut on the inside there, so I'm just using my scissors to trim and clean that. So you can see now we have this really beautiful loop. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to set that aside, and then we're going to die cut some of our additional pieces. So first off, I'm going to take my piece, and this time I'm also going to be using Joy. And I don't know for sure if I'll be able to fit both of these on this piece, but I'm hoping. So it looks like the word Joy will fit. So I'm going to hold that in place with some tape. And then I'm going to take the word Peace. And it looks like that one will fit too, so that's good. Then I'm going to need my piece of Whisper White cardstock. And now I'm going to need the outline for the word Peace. And then I'm also going to need the outline for the word Joy. So I'm going to stick that down. Then I have a piece of shaded spruce cardstock, and I'm going to die cut this large tree from my shaded spruce scrap piece, and I'm going to die cut this smaller size tree from my mint macaron scrap piece of cardstock. So I've got 4 different things I have to die cut. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I will be back. So I've gone ahead and die cut my pieces. So now I'm going to stamp my greetings. So I'm going to be using Just Jade Classic ink. And I'm only going to be using the little greeting that says "and" on it, because our greeting is going to be Peace and Joy. So I'm just stamping on my Whisper White cardstock piece. Then with my paper snips, I want to cut my greeting out, leaving just a very thin white border all the way around. So it's not even a 1/16 of an inch border. It's really just enough to give it a little bit of white. So now that all my pieces are ready, I'm now going to stamp my main panel. So I'm going to place my felt circle, or my felt little donut, on my cardstock panel as reference. And then I'm going to stamp some trees, just staggering the heights across the center of this cardstock using the large tree from the In the Pines stamp set. Now my cardstock is Just Jade and it's 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. Now, just to keep this cardstock from shifting, I'm trying to see if I can find my, here we go, my repositionable adhesive. So that just secures it to my grid paper. So now I'm going to start with a Just Jade tree. The Just Jade ink stamps darker than the Garden Green ink. And I want a tree to look like it's peeking up from the left of this circle and slightly higher. So I'm just going to stamp that. Now I'm going to stamp, I've got a tree here in shaded spruce, and I'm going to stamp this a little bit lower. Then I'm going to ink up the shaded spruce again. Now I'm going to take some of my Just Jade and I'm going to take some more Just Jade. So you can see what I'm doing is I'm overlapping the trees. And then finally, I'm going to take some of my shaded spruce and I'm going to stamp down here. So you can see what I've done is I've stamped all the way across my cardstock piece. So now I want to do the same thing with this that I did with my other card, the one that you see here, and that is that I want to add some texture to my panel. So I'm going to take my Subtle 3D embossing folder and I'm going to place this inside my embossing folder. I'm going to be embossing that, but I'm also going to take the words peace and joy, the ones I die cut out of the white cardstock, and I'm going to place them inside my embossing folder as well, and we're going to dry emboss this with the Subtle 3D embossing folder. So I'm back from my die cutting machine, and you can see I have my dry embossed cardstock panel and my dry embossed cardstock pieces. So now what I'm going to do is I want to center and stick this piece, this die cut circular piece, onto my cardstock panel. So I'm just going to hold my cardstock panel in place. And then what I want to do is I'm going to place some glue dots at the back of this felt piece. And I'm going to just press sections of my felt ring to my glue dots, probably spacing my glue dots about an inch apart, or a little bit less than an inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch apart. So now what I want to do is, you can see here I've placed glue dots all around the back of this piece. So now I want to try to maintain this circular shape while I very carefully lay it on the center of my cardstock piece. Now I'm not going to press down yet. So that looks like it's centered. You can always use a ruler if you need to. And then once you're happy with its placement, you can go ahead and lightly press it down so it's now stuck in place. So my next step now is to add my ribbon. And the ribbon I added in my original card is this white ribbon from the Flowers for Every Season ribbon combo pack. However, turns out I ran out of ribbon. So I had to look at what options I had left. I have this gingham ribbon, which also comes from the Flowers for Every Season pack, ribbon pack. And then I have this ribbon, the Fine Art ribbon, which is kind of like a craft color that has a gold tinge to it. Now I think either one of these ribbons would look good. If you see, if I were to have added this ribbon instead, you can see it still brings in some white. If I were to add this ribbon, then you can see it really ties into the gold there. And I'm actually kind of torn as to which of the ribbons I want to use, because I do like the look of both of these ribbons. I think though that I may actually go with the gingham ribbon. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut a piece of ribbon that is bigger than my cardstock panel. This is a little bit narrower than the white ribbon. Can't do anything about that, unfortunately. And I'm going to position it so that it's about a 1/4 inch up from the bottom of my card. Now, depending on, or my panel, now depending on how wide the ribbon is that you are planning on using, you may want to add your ribbon before you add your felt circle, because as you can see here, I actually have the ribbon tucked underneath the felt circle. So now I'm going to take a 12-inch piece of this ribbon. So because this ribbon is narrower than the white one, you can see here it's just aligned with the bottom edge of the circle. So what I'm going to do is I am going to have to adjust the tension of the ribbon, but I'm going to place a glue dot around underneath the center just to hold it in place while I tie my bow. So first I'm feeding a 12-inch piece of ribbon underneath. It's folded in half, and then I can go ahead, tie my knot. Then now I'm just adjusting the tension of my ribbon. Now I'm just going to take my ribbon and I'm going to tie it into a bow. Now once you've tied your bow, you can go ahead and adjust the placement of it, or the orientation, I guess you could say, the positioning of your bow. Once you're happy with the way your bow looks, you can go ahead and trim the ends at an angle. And then you can also adjust the positioning. So this ribbon is a little bit skinnier, as I mentioned, than the white ribbon that I originally chose. So I'm not a huge fan of how low it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it up a little bit higher. I'm positioning it so that it's kind of to the bottom right of the circle. So I'm going to use just some glue dots to hold it in place where I want it to be. And then now I can go ahead and wrap the ends of the ribbon around to the back. There you can see how that looks. So now let's just go ahead and stick this onto our card. And for that, I'm going to be using some Stampin' Dimensionals. So I'm going to position, I'm going to spread my Stampin' Dimensionals out along the back of this cardstock panel. Then I'm just going to remove the backing, and then once I've removed the backing, I'm going to center and stick this onto my card. So now let's go ahead and stick down our trees. So I'm going to use a combination of Stampin' Dimensionals and mini glue dots. So I'm going to put some mini glue dots on the center of my tree. And then because this is resting on a circle, so it's not like a full felt piece, I'm going to need to put Stampin' Dimensionals on either side of the back of this tree. So for that, I'm going to use the edges of my Stampin' Dimensionals. And as you can see, I'm basically just going to cut skinny little pieces and stick them along the back of segments of my tree. Now, as you do this, you just do want to make sure that you take a look at the front of your die cut piece just to make sure that your dimensionals are not sticking, like you can't see them from the front of your die cut piece. As you can see, this is quite fidgety work to do this. So now I'm just going to remove the backing from my dimensionals. And I'm going to stick this piece down. So this piece, I want it to, the bottom to align with the ribbon. And the center area of the tree is going to be on my felt circle. And then you can see the dimensional foam pieces on either side are kind of holding it in place. So now I'm going to do the exact same thing with this tree. I'm going to place some glue dots at the back, the center of the tree. And the area at the back center of this tree is smaller. So I'm only going to put 2. And then I'm going to cut small pieces of my dimensionals again to just put underneath segments of the branches. And for the green tree, you're going to actually make sure that you put your little dimensional pieces. If the back of the tree is facing you, you're going to want it on the left side, because when we flip it over, you're going to want it on the right. So this is probably enough. I'm just going to remove the backings. Then I'm once again going to align the bottom of the tree with my ribbon, and then I'm going to stick that down like so. So now let's go ahead and we are going to, first of all, stick the words, the gold words, to the inside of the white die cut and embossed outline pieces. And then because these are also going to be overlapping the foam, we're going to need to put a combination of glue dots and Stampin' Dimensionals. So the A is going to be overlapping the foam, so I'm putting 1 glue dot on the back of the A. Then I'm going to grab my mini Stampin' Dimensionals. And I'm also going to cut some strips of dimensional foam from the borders. So we can go ahead and stick this one down. Then for the word joy, it's the Y that's going to be overlapping. So I'm going to place a glue dot at the back of the Y, and then dimensionals on the other areas. So now I'm going to remove the backing from the Stampin' Dimensionals, and then we're going to stick this greeting down. And for the word and, I also want this on dimensional foam. So I'm going to cut a rectangle. And then I'm going to stick the word and in between the peace and the joy. So now the last thing I need to do is just to add a few rhinestones. And these are the, I think they're called gilded gems. I can't quite remember their name, but they're basically like solid gold colored rhinestones. And there you can see how our card looks, and here you can take a look at how it looks as compared to the card we created with the white ribbon. I actually like both of them the same. So there you have it, friends. Our card is done, and I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial.